Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of American Rambler. I'm your host, Colin Woodward. Thank you for listening to the podcast. On today's show, I have Keith Ryan Cartwright. Keith is a writer. He is based in the Nashville area now, but he spent a lot of time in LA. Originally a Midwest guy, so we are going to talk about his path from growing up in Wisconsin to winding up talking to a lot of rock musicians and country musicians over the years, and he has a book coming out this fall, Black Cowboys of Rodeo, and we sat down and talked. We had a long talk, and it went on so long that I realized I wasn't going to be able to do it as one episode unless I really chopped it up, and that's usually how it goes on this podcast anyway. If it's pretty long and I can get 2 episodes out of it, I will, to kind of maintain continuity and give people their due. But because Keith's writing has been so different in a lot of ways, writing about music for a while and now writing about rodeos, that I figured, well, I think we can do half of this as a standalone podcast, talking about his background and his adventures in LA with bands like Ratt and Poison and Tuff, and interviewing David Lee Roth and other folks. I figured, we'll let this one stand alone, and when the book is out in the fall, I will put up the second part of our conversation in which we talk about his book and his experiences with cowboys, why he wanted to write about African Americans and their contributions. That is an interesting story in itself, but that'll wait a few months, and you will hear more about Keith in the fall. So for right now, it's just me and him talking about writing, and Keith has been writing a long time. He's a little bit older than I am, but he started young, and I think most writers probably do. Obviously, you're not going to get published when you're 8 or 9 or even 13, 14 years old. But you get the bug early on, and you read and you write and you read, and then you write some more, and that kind of goes on forever. So it was a fun chat. His experiences in LA when he was young is kind of a little bit like that movie Almost Famous, hanging out with the rock groups. Pretty exciting being out in LA, I think, at any time, certainly if you're in the rock scene. And because Keith does have a lot to say, I won't say a lot in the introduction here, but again, look for his book Black Cowboys of Rodeo. That will be out later. I'm gonna hype it up later this fall when we do the second episode. But for now, you can pre-order that on Amazon and enjoy my conversation with Keith Ryan Cartwright. You're in Tennessee right now, but you said you're from Wisconsin originally, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Oshkosh, which it's not really halfway between Milwaukee and Green Bay. It's a little closer to Green Bay, but it's pretty much that halfway point. And I grew up there. I was born in December of '69, so I really grew up there in the '70s and '80s, and I always describe that time in Oshkosh, just this quintessential Midwest town with about 50,000 people. It kind of reminds you of a leftover Norman Rockwell painting, and when I look back, I'm glad I grew up there. It felt like a perfect place to grow up. It was a quintessential Midwest town with 4 seasons. It was a time in our lives, or a time in the country when you could get on your bicycle at 7:30 in the morning, and if you didn't make it back home till 3:30, 4 o'clock, 4:30, at least you were home in time for dinner, and no one was texting or calling or checking up on where you were, and heck, you weren't even wearing a helmet on your bicycle. You were just might
Right.
be at the park, you might be at a field, you might be at someone's house. Who knows what the day would hold, but it was man, it was fantastic, and a lot of that made me what I am today, I feel for the kids growing up there now, because it's not that anymore. It's probably not that anywhere, but it's certainly not that in Oshkosh.
No, this is the town where the clothing line came from, Oshkosh, B'gosh. Is that right?
The key to that came from, no longer there.
Okay.
Yeah, it little by little was moved south, and now, for all I know, it might even be out of the country. But all the manufacturing was taken out in my late teens.
Okay.
Headquarters was still there, and now that's not even there. There's nothing left in Oshkosh of the Oshkosh brand for Oshkosh B'gosh. It's wrong, but it was. That's where, man, if your friend's mom worked, half of those friends who had moms who worked, they worked for Oshkosh B'gosh. Like that's where a lot of the women worked, and there were some men too, but it was a lot of moms. Half of my friends' moms who worked, they would sew at Oshkosh B'gosh.
Okay.
Big overalls and T-shirts and whatever else. It was a big jolt to the economy when they left. You know, because it's in a kind of like a Midwest industrial city. They also, Oshkosh Truck is still there, and now I think it's just called Truck Corporation, and they get a lot of the military contracts and make lots of military vehicles. So a lot of people either work for Truck or they work for other industries, other small machine shops that are making things specific for Oshkosh Truck to use. And then there's another manufacturer, Leach, and they make garbage trucks that are used all over the country. And so it's a lot of factory work, a lot of blue collar hard work. People talk about working first, second, and third shift, that kind of thing. Like that's just something when you're a little kid. I knew what second shift meant. That meant your dad was going to work at 4:00, you know? And if you got third shift, it meant we were leaving for school. And by the time the bell rang, that kid's dad was getting home and would sleep while we were away at school. You know, just manufacturing was just part of the fabric.
And so when the jobs left, I'm guessing a lot of people left. So it just kind of feels gutted. Is that how it feels?
Well, only Oshkosh B'gosh left. So Truck and all those others they're still there, and the city is now 75,000 maybe. You know, so it's bigger, but it just doesn't feel as rich and vibrant. My mom says I'm a little hard on it when I come back, that I have these high expectations of a fading memory that I'm trying to grab onto. But you know, the city's changed, but the whole country has changed. I know when I go back, I look around and I don't know what I would do if I lived there.
Yeah, I know that feeling. I mean, I'm from a pretty small town in central Mass, but sort of the same story of factory. And in this case, nothing really replaced the factories. I mean, it was textile mills, and they were really kind of shut down before my family even moved there. So it's this old, small factory town, about 5,000 people. And I don't want to get political necessarily, but like, I think in the last 2 years, you know, people have been very vocal about their political views. So I go up there, I see a lot of Trump stuff, and there's like a gun store next to the grocery store that was never there before. So it's kind of, I don't know. It just doesn't feel great anymore, and doesn't feel great to visit. But it's kind of just it's been limping along for many years, and I think a lot of towns are like that. But your town where you're from, I guess 50,000 now. It's even bigger, so at least there's something kind of there. But these other towns like where I grew up, there's just nothing. There's no jobs, and people don't want to live there.
Big enough town, even when I was growing up, that you didn't know everybody. You know what I mean?
Right.
It was like, as a teenager, you could make a mistake, and your mom and dad didn't necessarily know.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking even like in my town, it was kind of cliche. People say, "Well, everybody knew everybody." I mean, in my town, we didn't really know what was going on, so it was pretty quiet. And like you said, it was when I was growing up, you could ride your bike all day, and wasn't really a big deal. And I know things have changed, but we're almost the same. I'm a little bit younger than you. I was born in '75, but I think sounds like we kind of had the same experience. And looking at your CV and some of the things that you've done, these are definitely some things I remember, like the bands that you've followed and written about. There's a lot of crossover with guys that I like, so that was that was good to see. But you started writing at a very young age. You want to tell the story about the typewriter you got when you were a kid?
Yeah. I don't remember getting interested in journalism, but I know that I asked for a typewriter, and on Christmas morning, 1977, 3 days after turning 8 years old, I got a typewriter. And as a matter of fact, I have a photograph of me opening the present, and it's half the paper's torn off, and you can see that it's a typewriter and the expression on my face. And then I have another photograph from about 6 or 7 hours later. I had also gotten a desk, and my dad had assembled the desk and the typewriter sitting on it. And I got all dressed up. I'm wearing, because the first photo I'm in my pajamas, and in the second photo, I've got the button-down shirt on with the big butterfly collar and a sweater vest and a big smile, and I'm sitting at the typewriter, and that is when I literally typed for the first time in my entire life that afternoon. And from 8 until I don't even know how many years. I mean, for years and years and years, I hate to say it, I was less of a book reader and more of a magazine reader. And when I would read these magazines, I had a little tabletop easel that I would lean the magazine up, and as I was reading it, I would read a sentence, and then I would look at the typewriter and type it, and then read a sentence and type it, and so I basically retyped thousands of magazine articles. Wow. And I did this for 5-6 years, probably, and I don't want to say that I did that exact exercise every single day, but there wasn't a week that went by that I did not do that exercise. And I had no idea at the time, none whatsoever. But what I did recognize was sometimes it felt very easy to retype the article. And other times it felt very laborious. Like it felt, and there were times it felt excruciating typing it, and I probably filled out a time or two on a story, but I always, for some reason, I would always try to muscle through, because my mom was really big on teaching me the word stick-to-itiveness. And that I needed to understand stick-to-itiveness and to make sure she didn't want to raise a quitter. But, even though she didn't raise a quitter, I bailed out on a couple of those things that just felt like difficult to retype. And what I didn't know that I would learn many, many years later is that different writers have different voices, and there's different pacing. And so I was unintentionally discovering man, of my voice or the pacing of my writing, like who I would one day be as a writer, and I don't know if that's part of what made once I started writing my own things, if that's what made that transition work. I really don't know, but in high school, I interviewed. I was a freshman or a sophomore, maybe a freshman. I interviewed this guy who had earned a PhD from Johns Hopkins University, and he had actually invented an instrument. He's like literally credited with inventing an instrument, and I don't remember what it was, and it's not something that went on to become widely used or what have you. But he was a music professor, and the fact that he said I invented this, and he had it and he showed it to me, like I was fascinated by that. I was curious about it, and so I had a tape recorder, and I recorded a conversation. I said, "Can I talk to you about it?" And I didn't know I was in Wisconsin, man, and it's decades before the internet. I didn't know Johns Hopkins University. I didn't realize how prestigious
Right.
that was, right?
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
but there was something struck a nerve, and so I recorded this conversation. That's the first conversation or interview, if you will, that I ever recorded in my life. And then I wrote a Q&A up with a little introduction, and turned that in for an English assignment. And then I did. I don't know what made me pick this, but I had to do we had to do this big in-depth research paper with a bibliography and all kinds of stuff, and I was really big on watching the nightly news, and somehow felt like I was gonna be involved with the nightly news, and so I was feeling that, but keeping it to myself and not talking about it with friends or whatever, because they were all listening to Kiss and Motley Crue, and I couldn't talk about I like watching the nightly news, and I want to do some research. And so when this research paper came up, I did this whole, and I still have it. I did this whole deal on look at airline deregulation. Dude, I don't know anything about airline deregulation. Right? I can't remember at all what I wrote. I have the paper. I have all the research. I have a manila envelope with the note cards that we had to do, the bibliography, all the notes I took, photocopies I made from microfilm at the library, and the paper that I wrote with the footnotes. And I got the whole thing. And I remember just being like totally immersed in it, and then
Yeah.
I did another one of those in high school on the history of the baseball bat and how a tree becomes a bat. And I was just into the research, man. It wasn't
Yeah.
even the topics.
Do you still have that typewriter, that first one you got?
No,
Okay.
I know. Now I know, like, it was pretty popular for kids at that time, or
Okay.
kids. Kids. I was a kid, 8 years old,
Yeah.
So I've gone on eBay, and obviously I'll never get mine back, but I wanted to go on and maybe find one that was like that and buy it to have.
Okay.
But I don't currently have that. But yeah, I've pretty much typed darn near every day since 3 days after turning 8 years old.
Yeah. Yeah, my dad used to have this great typewriter that I used to mess around with when I was a little bit older. I wasn't 8, but, when I was in my teens, I would write stuff, and he had this great, I can't remember what type of typewriter. I guess it's long gone, but that thing was just beautiful. It weighed a ton, but it just had a really great feel to it. The font was cool, and they obviously people don't write on typewriters anymore. When did you make the transition? Do you remember to word processor or computer?
The first time I ever typed an article, what's interesting is all my original article, when I first start writing, when I write for a publication for the first time in Wisconsin, even when I was in Los Angeles, I was writing on a typewriter, a different one, but I was still writing on a typewriter. As a matter of fact, in the very early 90s, I would write my article on a typewriter and then go to the liquor store next to the 7-Eleven, and I could pay the guy $10 and he would fax my article to the magazine. And then someone at the magazine had to retype it.
Wow.
Because they were in Burbank and I didn't have a car. I lived in I was in the San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles. People who are listening will know I'm at the far west end in Reseda, and Entertainment Today was all the way in Burbank, and so it was 3 buses to get to Burbank. And I would do that every once in a while, but most times I would take the bus. Because I would still have to take the bus and go to some publicist's office, and then I would interview Ian Astbury from the Cult, and I got my recorder, and then they didn't know that I didn't have a car, and they'd be like, "Hey, do we need to validate your parking?" It's like, nah, I got it. I'm not in the garage. But meanwhile, I would walk like 3 blocks away because I did not want them to pull out me standing at the bus stop. And then I would take the bus all the way home, and then I would transcribe my interview, and then I would write the article, and I would go to the liquor store and fax it for $10. Okay.
Well, I mean, not having a car is one thing, but I mean, back then it wasn't like you could have emailed it to someone anyway, you know? So yeah, it was either drop it off in person or I guess, I mean, do what you did. But that's interesting to hear. When did you kind of get out of Wisconsin? What was your path? Was LA kind of your first stop?
No. So my very first stop. So I always, from like I told you, from 8, I knew I wanted to write, man. But what was the pathway to that? I just didn't know. You know what I mean? Like,
I still don't know. I don't know now.
Like, where do they come from?
Right.
Right. I didn't want to be the local sports writer covering Oshkosh North basketball.
Yeah.
I wanted to possibly have a shot to interview Van Halen, right? Not basketball. And so it was like, how's that going to happen? I don't understand. I don't get all that. And I didn't know what the pathway was. And so there was a part of me that, as much as I wanted to be a writer, I thought I would end up going to college and become an architect. And then all of a sudden, I saw this opportunity to go to an art school down in Florida, in Fort Lauderdale, on the very south end of Fort Lauderdale, kind of between Fort Lauderdale, Miami area. And I had never been to Florida. A whole bunch of people always talked about spring break in Florida and how great it was. And I thought, wow, they're just going on spring break and they say how great it is. I'm gonna move there. And so I bought a one-way ticket, and I went to Florida to go to this art school, but I was going to study video art with the idea of directing music videos.
Okay.
And, I went for one. It was a trimester. They went year round, but it was 3 trimesters. And I went to one. It was really, really expensive, and I realized, they were full of shit telling us that we could all become music video director. Like, I had a feeling, best case scenario, that the top kids that graduated might get to work at a local news station, going around whatever metropolitan city with a camera, filming the news, you know, and it was like, it was really kind of disappointing. But I wanted to be a realist, and I was like, man, I don't want my mom and dad to spend, you know, all their money paying for me to go there, and then I'm running a camera filming an accident, you know. That's how I felt. That's what I felt like. What really would end up happening, and so I left and I went back home to Wisconsin. And that's when I discovered a magazine, a brand new entertainment magazine out of Madison called Night Sights and Sounds. But I was only 19 years old, and I didn't know what it would take to write for them. You know, I had no idea. And so I had gone to college. I didn't know what AP style. I didn't know any of that. Right. Nothing. I'm just a kid who's had a typewriter for 11 years, you know, typing. And I knew what I wanted to read. And I just thought, man, just write what you want to read. You just got to get somebody to give you a chance. And so this is before even caller ID. So I called up the magazine, and the girl answered, and I didn't give her my real name because I was kind of on a fact-finding mission. And I asked her, I said, hey, I saw your magazine. What do I got to do to write? And she said, well, where are you located? And I told her, and she said, man, we are really looking for a music writer in the Fox Valley. If you could send me a resume and 3 clips, we'll take a look at it, and we could probably get you out doing stories this weekend. I'm like, wow, okay. And so I hung up. And then I called the city paper in Oshkosh, and I asked for the news desk, and the lady answered, and I said, hey, I'm working on a media chapter in my class, and we have to define some terms. I know what a clip is, but I'm curious. As a journalist, how would you describe a clip? And then she verified for me that I didn't have, you know, like, damn, I don't have any clips. And so, and I really wanted to do some music stories for these people. And it felt like they were right to say yes. Like they wanted to say yes, but I didn't have any clips. And I thought, do I call them back and tell them the truth that I've never written, but give me a chance? And, or is there something else I can do? And so what I ended up discovering was 2 cities away, there was a community college, and the community college had a student paper. And so I called the paper up on the phone and introduced myself and said, yeah, I was on campus today and saw the paper, and I'd really love to contribute some music stories. And I never said I went to class. I just said I was on campus.
Right.
I wasn't enrolled. I just said, hey, I was on campus. I saw the paper. It's the first time I had ever picked it up. I'd love to contribute. They said, man, that'd be great. And I wrote 4 music stories for them before they realized I wasn't a student and told me I couldn't write anymore. Okay. And so I took the 3 best out of those 4, and I sent those with a cover letter, not a resume, because, mind you, I really don't have a resume.
Right.
Nothing to put on it, nothing worthwhile. You know, what am I going to tell them? I worked as a cashier at a department store. I mean, that's, you know, so I didn't have a resume, but I could write a cover letter. So I wrote a cover letter. I sent them 3 of those stories, which were record reviews. Okay. And they're not great record. They weren't great record reviews, but they were full of passion. I'll say that. And I sent them in, and they obviously were desperate for somebody in the Fox Valley. And they told me yes, only to discover after they told me yes that I was only 19. I wasn't even old enough to go to the bars to review the bands.
Right.
Because you had to be 21.
Yeah.
And, I think the publisher would have just said, man, you got to be 21, and would have told me to ham scram. But the editor, she was still in college going to the University of Wisconsin, and she liked me. She liked my energy. And my cousin was in a band back in Los Angeles, and she liked that band, and she knew him and whatever else. And so she gave me a chance. She said, look, this is weird. Instead of earning your way up to write about national bands, she said a lot of the writers, especially in like 1990 and 91 in Wisconsin, they were all into alternative music. And so none of them wanted to do any of the heavy metal or pop music stuff. And so the first band I ever interviewed, ever of any type, was Quiet Riot.
Yeah. And where were they sort of at in their career though? Because I was into them as a kid, like in, 83, 84, but you're talking like late 80s. How were they doing then?
Yeah, I'm talking
okay.
I'm talking summer of 1990 at the Winnebago County Fair.
Okay.
The wheels were about to fall off.
All right.
You know what I mean? Like
County Fair, yeah, that's usually not a good sign. No offense. Yeah.
No, the wheels were about to come off. But man, that was Kevin DeBro. Like at that time for me.
Sure, yeah. But I mean, did you get a sense from, I don't know how long you talked to them, like, were you getting sort of a weird vibe from them, or were they just kind of doing, their usual deal with the media? Like, how'd that interview go?
So the two guys that I interviewed was Frankie Benally, the drummer, and no, not Frankie. I'm sorry, I take that back. That was not Frankie. It was Carlos Cavazo, the guitar player, who and this was in a trailer, so that was a fly-in date for them. They weren't out on. They flew in, so they're in a trailer behind the stage, and during the interview, which to me just made it rock and roll. Carlos was just doing bong hits the whole time. He rarely talked. And Kevin excused himself to take a step to the back end of the trailer, but you could hear, and you knew exactly he was, snorting a couple lines of cocaine, and then he would come back to the back to the front of the bus. I mean, they were probably dismayed at playing the Winnebago County Fair. Like they were probably doing what they needed to do to cope with Winnebago County Fair.
Yeah, well, and you said they broke up not long after that. Is that what happened?
Yeah, but then they would get back, like that whole scene, that whole genre. The wheels were coming off from 90 to 92, and by the time you got to 93, if you were 80s metal, it was like persona non grata. So they're cruising toward persona non grata, and they know it. They realize it at that point.
And you said this publication was based in Madison, is that right? Yeah. So I'm guessing they got more of the. So they get like the more alternative acts coming through in Madison.
Yeah, they got all of that, and all the Madison and Milwaukee-based writers would, they would all be basically bickering with one another over who was going to get what story. And I had my pick of the litter on, metal, so like I spent the day with Skid Row. Like a lot of people don't know Quicksand Jesus. That video was filmed in Green Bay at the Brown County Arena. And so I spent the day with them and then wrote a behind the scenes making of a rock and roll video with Skid Row.
Okay. Yeah, I guess the early 90s is kind of when you're seeing that shift there. Kind of Nirvana comes in and kind of blows it all apart with the hair bands and stuff.
Yes. So Nirvana comes in and they're going to be the next big thing. But I got to tell you, Nirvana is not responsible for 80s metal hitting a rough spot. '80s
Yeah.
metal is responsible for hitting its own spot.
Yeah, it's sort of a cycle that I think rock goes through. It gets kind of big and bloated, and the production gets out of hand, and then someone comes in and kind of strips it down. But no, you're right. I mean, yeah, it was just kind of its own worst enemy. And a lot of these bands, I mean, they're lucky if they last 10 years. I mean, it's tough to keep a band together that long, especially if you're pretty big. I mean, Quiet Riot was pretty big. You said you toured with Poison at one
That's
point.
much later. That's 2007. So not long after I for about 18 months or 2 years, not quite 2 years, 18 months or so, I'm writing for Night Sights and Sounds. I'm working I'm not making a living at it, but I'm writing, I'm gathering clips, I'm meeting a lot of publicists, and like I said, my cousin lives in Los Angeles. He's in a band. His band gets a deal with Atlantic Records, and
Who's the band?
they're called Tuff. They were right in line. Like it went Motley Crue, Poison, Warrant, Tuff.
Was
So
it TUFF?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they had their first single was a big hit on MTV called "I Hate Kissing You Goodbye," and but they were at the tail end of that. They got their record came out in May of 1991. I moved to Los Angeles in '92, and I toured with his band, even though they end up losing that Atlantic deal. But I worked with him and toured with him for 4.5, 5 years. And I'm writing. I'm doing the writing, and I'm working at a music store, and you're doing everything you can to survive. I mean, we lived in a 4-bedroom house. There was a tool shed in the backyard that was turned into a 5th bedroom, and there were 14 of us who lived there, and somehow would have to come up with like $2,100 for rent. And but we managed to do it, and I wouldn't do that as an almost 52-year-old, but dude, I would relive 21, 22, 23 living in that house with that group of guys.
Oh, I bet it was nuts. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about the rock and roll lifestyle. Yeah. I mean,
it was amazing. And for someone who grew up as an only child, I really came of age, and you learn how to rely on yourself, and in a city like LA, you know what I mean?
A bit like Almost Famous, a bit like that movie.
Yeah. I mean, It really was. I mean, when you think about it, man, I was 19, and I'm not old enough to go into bars, so they got to send me to the county fair to interview Quiet Riot while they do bong hits for 45 minutes.
Yeah. It's quite a first interview, but you said
awesome.
With Poison.
I wouldn't change that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That I mean, I think any writer that has kind of a, you can be in writing for various reasons, but I think a lot of people, they kind of want to live some of that lifestyle. So if you can be near the guys, writing about the guys, kind of be accepted in those circles. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that.
No, it doesn't. But I'll tell you what, there was, and here's a real interesting deal is, so because I lived in a house with them and I toured with the band, I had long hair. It's like some people might say I looked like I could have been in a band, but I wasn't. But then if the guys from Tuff listen, if one of them were to listen to this, they would giggle if I said there were people who thought I could be in the band, because I didn't look like I could be in the band, right? But a lot of other people, they were like, wow, you guys are, there was a lot of freedom we had, you know, to be yourself, to be self-expressive.
And I think too, yeah, I mean, as guys, I'm in my mid 40s now, you're in your 50s. Like I did not have that kind of experience as a 22, 23-year-old, like living in LA and stuff like that. So I think if you're going to do that, you kind of hit it at the right age. It sounds like, I mean, you can
absolutely
stay up all night and function.
Absolutely. And you make sacrifice whatever it is you do in life. You have to make a sacrifice to really pursue it or what have.
Yeah.
So we didn't have a lot of money, but man, we were never short on shit to do.
Well, you said 14 people were
at one
in
point
the house?
at the peak we had 4. Yeah.
A lot of girls around.
Yeah. I'll just say this. So the day I moved into the house, September 5th, 1992. And one of the roommates that lived there, Billy, it was his birthday. He was turning 21. So it's his 21st birthday. And I mean, I move in during the day. I showed up and I had a duffel bag.
Right.
You know what I mean? I didn't have furniture or anything. Like,
yeah.
Duffel bag. I showed up. I flew in, and I arrive at the house. I got my duffel bag, and my cousin tells me, hey, you're lucky. I got a closet pulled aside for you. It's empty, and it's a linen closet. Like, it doesn't even have hangers or nothing. Like, I got a linen closet, but good thing all I had was a duffel bag because I couldn't put much else in it. And all of a sudden they said, oh, yeah, by the way, it's Billy's 21st birthday. We're having some people over.
Uh-huh.
Okay. I don't know, but midnight, there's 100 people at the house. We got a pool in the backyard, and
man.
It's a party. And so, and I start recognizing people because this is September of 92. So it's right after Vince quit or got kicked out of Motley Crue, and he's now getting ready to put out his solo record. Well, the record's out, and he had just played the MTV Music Awards. Now, it wasn't Vince, but his band is at our house at the park. Like they're in the backyard, like drinking beer and partying. And then you start recognizing some girls who had been in Playboy and Hot Rod magazine models and Asphalt Ballet, a band called Wild Side, like all these Love Hate, all these bands who had record deals between 88 and 92, and they were all those LA bands. Like those guys, they're all at this party. And I thought, man, what took so long for me to get here? and so the party goes, and I don't know, 2:00. It's not like an all the way to the. I mean, there were some people still there all the way into the morning, and so like the next day, I get to meet all 14 people, and all 14 people means they've yet to meet me. And so on Sunday, by the time like 5, 6 o'clock comes around, there's different people in the house. And so I'm like thinking, man, how am I going to keep everyone in who's who and remember all the names? And it seems like there's more than 14 people in the house right now. And so I just assume some other people are their friends. Well, it turns out there was this guy from Orange County who came to the party and then just sort of crashed and hadn't left. And it wasn't until Monday. So remember, the party was on Saturday. So now it's Monday. I've been in LA for 48 hours, and two of the guys come up to me and this other guy that's in the house who I don't realize that he doesn't live there. And they said, all right, which one of you is Stevie's cousin? And I said, that would be me. I am. I'm Keith. And they go, okay, so you've moved in. And I said, yeah, my stuff's in the linen closet. And they looked at the other guy and they said, and who are you? And he said, hi, I'm Weasel. I'm from Orange County. And they said, Weasel, you got to get your shit and get out of here. And it turned out he was just some dude that crashed at the house, and no one kicked him out because they weren't sure if he was the new guy or not.
That sounds like a great band name, Weasel from Orange County.
Weasel from Orange County would be a great band or a great television show.
Yeah, a great pilot. Yeah. Well, that sounds like fun. And I mean, when you were with Poison, I mean, obviously by that point they had been around a long time. How many original members were still in the band at that point?
All four.
Okay. Yeah. Because, as you know, some bands, they're around so long, you get like 100, 200% turnover, and there might be like one original guy. It's basically like a glorified cover band. But, okay, so they were all still in it, and you went touring with them. That was like everywhere, right? Across the globe?
So that was, you got to remember now that's years later. That's 2007. So my cousin, who I told you was in the singer of the band Tuff, at that point, he was managing a young band from Sweden named Veins of Jenna. And so he met Veins of Jenna at the Whiskey A Go-Go on Sunset Boulevard. And they had just flown in for like a week, like a 10-day trip from Falkenberg, Sweden. And dude, they were like 19 years old. They looked like it was the mid-decade of the first in the 2000s. So he met them in like the fall of 95, or I'm sorry, of 2005 maybe, roughly perhaps. And and so he goes up, he introduces himself, they know who he is, and he's really curious about, like, I wonder how they look great, and they played a couple songs at some festival thing that he was at. And so he said, hey, when are you leaving? And they weren't leaving for a few more days. And then he said, man, I want to take you over to my friend's house and let's just record a song together. Let's see how it works out. Let's see how you like working with him and like some ideas that I might have. And I want to kind of see what ideas you have. And so he took him over to Gilby Clarke, who was the guitar player that took the place of Izzy Stradlin in Guns N' Roses. And so they went to Gilby's house, and Gilby produced a couple of songs with them before they left to go back to Sweden. And before they left, they worked out where my cousin was going to manage them, and then they had to do all the paperwork to get the visas and everything. And he brought them back to the States, and they got a record deal from Bam Margera, and then they did a couple different tours, and then in the summer of 2007, they went on the Poison Ratt tour as the opening band. And my job as a tour manager for the third band on an amphitheater tour where everything is handled by Poison, is just get them to the venue and keep them out of trouble.
Yeah. Like
literally that was it. You're babysitting, at that point. It's a babysitting gig, They wanted them there no earlier than 11 in the morning and no later than 1 o'clock in the afternoon, even though they weren't going to play until 6:45. They wanted to know that they were there. Like, the last band that can screw up the timing is the first band, especially when And so they wanted them there. And then when we were done, and you get the stage struck, and all of their equipment rode on one of the semis with Poison gear. And so you couldn't even load the truck. We just had to get it all packed up and stacked next to the trailer that it was going to go on at the very end of the night. And then they wanted you to get out of there, be gone, make your way to the next city. And so that's how that went for the first couple weeks. And then my cousin and Bobby Dahl, the bass player in Poison, who's kind of like the businessman of that band, they were on the phone talking, and one thing led to another. And instead of traveling on our own, Ratt was traveling on 2 buses. So the band was on one bus, and they had a kind of a half crew on the other bus. And then we went on the Ratt bus that had the crew members.
I'm sorry, did you have much interaction with the other bands then?
Absolutely, you're there all day.
Yeah, okay. And how how were they? Were they still kind of living the lifestyle, or were they kind of just mellowed out a bit? What was it like?
No, there's nothing mellow about being on a Poison tour. It is so the 4. I'm not saying anything that hasn't already publicly been shared.
Okay.
The four members of Poison travel on 4 separate buses. They really don't speak.
Oh yeah.
They see one another on stage, and then the semis and all the buses are configured and parked behind the venue it's configured in a way that that they can go on and off their bus and in and out of their dressing rooms pretty much without seeing one another. Mostly it's keeping Bobby Dahl and Bret Michaels from passing one another.
So they just hate each other that much.
Yeah.
Well, I've heard that about the Everly Brothers. Like later in their career, they couldn't talk to each other.
But same kind of dynamic.
Yeah. That's, well, I mean, I guess they at least were able to figure something out. I mean, most bands will just call it quits, but I mean, they were huge in the late 80s with that one album, Open Up and Say Ah. That was huge.
Man, well, I'm going to tell you something. In 2007, man, people can say what they want, but we played amphitheaters, and there was never less than 10,000 people.
Yeah.
In St. Louis, the show got moved from the amphitheater to the Speedway, and it was like 31,000.
Yeah. No, I mean, good for them. I mean, to get back to Nirvana and stuff, like they did kind of blow it apart, but at the same time, these bands, they were always kind of popular. A lot of them managed to get through it, and they're just doing their thing in the 2000s or even now. I mean, a lot of these bands are still touring, and they're in their 70s, some of these guys. So, they saw a good thing, and they just kept doing it, a lot of them. So, yeah, I mean, I like these guys. Like, if George Thorogood was in town playing the State Fair, I'd go see him, I mean, whether they're 70s, 80s nostalgia acts, I mean, people still love it. So, how long did that last?
But those experiences, you got to remember, when I'm writing about music, especially the height of my freelance career, which I would say was 2000 to 2008, in that window of time, because of the experiences I had on the road and the behind the scenes that I knew, right? When I'm having a conversation with someone who's in a band, it doesn't take them long to realize this guy knows what he's talking about. I remember the first time I interviewed Duff McKagan from Guns N' Roses. He knew my cousin, right? So he knows my cousin. He knew that I worked with my cousin's band and that I had been on the road. And so there's a little latitude of what you're allowed to talk to them about, And
right.
and when I interviewed him was right after he got sober, So
okay.
It was a very excited Duff McKagan, like he was enjoying enjoying life, you know?
Yeah.
And I had done a lot of, all in the 90s is, you know, me writing and touring and no college until 96.
Well, and it seems like, yeah, I mean, you live in the Nashville area right now.
Yeah.
So you were able to interview a lot of Nashville guys, kind of like the alt country dudes and bands like that. But I'm really interested in your rock and roll stuff, but I don't want to devote the podcast entirely to that. So I'll try to segue here because you're with Poison. You said 2007, but around 2009 you start writing about bull riding, right?
Yeah, there's a whole part so there was my rock and roll life from 90 to like 96, right? And then 96 I go to college, you know. And so what happened was, so I was already writing about music, and I'm doing all the different, you know, going on tour with my cousin's band. And there was still this notion in my mind that I would one day, I don't know, direct videos or somehow get involved in movies. And so I wanted to intern for Imagine Entertainment, which is a company owned by Ron Howard and Brian Grazer. Every Wednesday at 11 o'clock, I would call Imagine Entertainment to inquire about an internship. And after a few months, without fail, every Wednesday at 11 o'clock, this guy, Michael Rosenberg, gets on the phone. And he's the third in charge at Imagine Entertainment. So Ron Howard is the movie director. Brian Grazer is his business partner. And they're still partners today. They've been partners for over 30 years, going on 40 years of making movies together. And Michael Rosenberg has worked with them the whole time. And so Michael gets on the phone, and it's a big deal to get this guy on the telephone. And I tell him that I wanted to intern for Imagine. He explains that, hey, we were a private company. We went public. It didn't work out. We're in the process of buying it back and becoming private. And in this interim, we can't have interns. It has to do with insurance purposes of having people working who aren't really on our payroll. We can't have interns right now. And then I said, oh, no problem. I don't need to be called an intern. I'll just pretend I'm hanging out at the office, only I'm doing stuff. And he goes, no. You don't understand. I can't have you in the building. He said, where else do you want to intern in Hollywood? I'll call. He goes, just the fact that you call every Wednesday at 11 o'clock and you're this militant about it. He goes, man, I love it, and I wish you could be my intern, but we can't. I'll call anywhere. He said, where do you want to intern? I said, Imagine's the only place I want to intern. When will you be private again? I'll just wait. And he laughed, and he said, man, where did you graduate? And I said, well, I hope I didn't give off any false impression that I'm a college graduate. I haven't graduated. He goes, okay, where are you going? And I said, I've never gone to college. And he was blown away, and he spent the next 15 to 20 minutes just impressing upon me the importance of going to college and the fact that, like, dude, I looked up to Imagine Entertainment, you know? And so if Michael Rosenberg is telling me I should go to college, that's what it took, man. The next day I went to Los Angeles Pierce College in Winnetka on the west end of the San Fernando Valley and filled out the application to go to this community college. And I started in January of 96. Yeah, January 96. And I did 1 year, but I didn't do it in an actual regular school year. I did it 1 year over an actual calendar year at Pierce. Because by that point, it was like, man, can I go to school? Like, I've been out for a while, you know? So after 7 years, what's a school setting going to be like? And I realized then that through a sense of maturity, responsibility, the fact that I was set on doing this, it came easy. It came really easy. And then I realized, okay, I can actually get a degree. Wow, I can go to college. I'm going to graduate. I can do this. I'm going to graduate. I'm going to get a bachelor's degree. But I told myself I can't do it in LA. So after a year, I knew I needed to transfer. And it's a whole nother story for another day on how I picked Middle Tennessee State University. But I came to find Middle Tennessee State, and I moved to Murfreesboro to go to college. And so in my mind, my only frame of reference for Murfreesboro was college. So I didn't know anyone. I didn't have anything else that I was focused on doing. All my energy was on go to college and graduate. I need to graduate. And so that was my frame of reference for Tennessee was I'm here to get a degree. And then by the time I graduated, I got hired as a freelance writer for the Tennessean, writing music stories. And they knew that I had this rock and roll background and had moved here from LA. And so they let me have my pick of writing rock and roll stories. And so I hate to feel like I'm somehow attached to these guys, but the first article I ever wrote for the Tennessean in 1999 was a Poison article.
Yeah.
And no one from the Tennessean wanted to touch Poison with a 10-foot pole. So all the rock and roll was mine. Kid Rock, Matchbox 20, and then everything that started to happen from 2000 on, that's probably your window of music, like 2000 to 2005, 6, 7, 8, like right in that window of time, everything that was rock and roll, I interviewed them for the Tennessean.
Yeah, you've got a really great list of people there. I mean, some people that are Nashville based, but also way beyond that. I mean, like you said, Van Halen, and I mean the list just goes on and on with the rock bands. But I mean, Nashville now it's almost. I mean, it is still a country town, but the rock presence is pretty huge there.
Absolutely.
Jack White, he lives there now,
Yeah.
Things like that.
The nickname for Nashville, it's not the country music. I mean, it is the country music capital, but that's not the nickname. The nickname is Music City, USA.
Right.
And so for years, early on in their career, not so much anymore, but early on, all the Matchbox 20 records were all recorded in Nashville at Ocean Way.
Yeah.
Nashville's where Dylan went electric. I mean, that's like that's rock and roll right there.
Yeah, no, it's a great town for music, and I mean, a lot of the bands that I like are based in Nashville, and they're kind of country, but they're more rock bands, and people coming from all over. I just saw I think the last band I saw live before COVID was the Sadies, who are Canadian, but man, they were great playing here in Richmond, and I think they're still based in Nashville. So yeah, you have your pick of the litter there as a music writer. That's a good place to be.
And then once you're the Tennessean got me in the door of talking to all the different publicists, right? And then so now you have access. And then I called. I called like Jackson, Mississippi, Charleston, South Carolina, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and some different places, cities like that, where all these bands are going to tour, and they're going to eventually play there. And so I would say, I would basically talk to the entertainment editor and be like, hey, Edwin McCain is coming to Charleston, South Carolina. I said, I just spent an hour with him talking. Did you want a preview? And they'd be like, oh, really? Yeah. If you got one you can put together. I'm like, yes, I do. And so the publicist, rather than giving you 10 or 15, maybe 20 minutes on the phone, they're going to give you 30 minutes, 45 minutes, sometimes an hour on the phone, because they now know I've got 12 to 15 publications. And over the course of the year-long tour that their artist is going to do, there's going to be a number of times where they can say, "Hey, Keith, can you plug a preview in Jackson at the Post and Courier?" And it's like, yeah, I can.
Yeah.
And then that's how, like, it's really about relationship building when you're a freelance writer. So sometimes a publication wants a story and you got to try to go get the publicist to give you access. And sometimes a publicist is trying to get placed in a publication. And sometimes it's just me wanting to do it,
Right. Yeah.
It just sort of happens. And so, and that's kind of how the David Lee Roth interview happened. Was I placed a few stories on some, they call them baby bands, so it's a band when you're putting out their first record and they're out touring and they're pushing that first single and it hasn't quite broke yet. It's a baby band. And so, you place a few stories on some baby bands, even though it is a newer band that hasn't broke. Sometimes that band that hasn't broke, well, guess what? It's Matchbox 20, man. When they break, they're going to really break, right?
Yeah.
And you compare in entertainment today, a weekly publication in Los Angeles, it doesn't publish anymore. I was the first person in the country to include Matchbox 20 on my 10 best albums of the year, a year before 3 a.m. finally broke. They were almost ready to give up on that album. So that album was out and kind of bombed. I thought it was amazing. The first time I heard it, I was blown away. I loved everything about it. But it took about 14 months after that first album was released before 3 a.m. hit and made Matchbox 20 the band it was. But a whole year earlier, I had put it on my top 10 albums, and this publicist, she never forgot that. And she never forgot that I helped her with some other baby bands. And then she knew I grew up a Van Halen fan, and she called and said, "Hey, I got some available time with Dave tomorrow. Did you want to do an interview?" And I'm like, "Dave?" And I'm like thinking Dave Navarro or, Dave who? And she goes, No, David Lee Roth. And I said, "Oh, yeah, really?"
Yeah.
Okay. And then the next day he called and called early and he woke me up.
The morning guy.
Well, the time he got the time, there's a little confusion as to what the actual scheduled time was, and it was going to be a morning interview. It just ended up being earlier in the morning than
okay. Were they touring at that point? What point was? Okay.
This was before. I mean, he's on his own at that.
Okay.
The David Lee Roth tour, but he was very open to talking about Van Halen at that time, or his time in Van Halen, or why at that point it didn't appear as though they were going to get back together, and he would always refer to Alex Van Halen as Eddie's sister.
Oh, jeez. Well, that last album they did together, I thought was terrific. Was it 2014 or 15 when that came out? I guess it was the last one they ever did, right?
Yeah, the live album.
I was one with the train on the cover. It was Dave again, and it was like the late 70s all over. I mean, I thought it was great, but obviously, Eddie died, so they are not gonna. Well, I don't know. You guess never say never, but obviously the original band cannot get back together. But yeah, Dave's always been kind of putting himself out there. I mean, he's a trip. So what was that interview like?
Well, you got Diamond Dave, so it was all the
Okay.
like he didn't talk. He didn't just talk, but
Right.
large. Like, so when I answered the phone and I said hello, it started out with him saying, like a thunderbolt in your Cheerios, son. It's time to wake up and smell the toxic fumes of another beautiful day in America. How the hell are you? And it was that, like,
Okay.
for a half hour.
Yeah.
The shtick, like, I wanted to break the shtick.
Right.
Man,
Yeah.
he didn't really do that.
Yeah. I know how that could be with some of those guys, and yeah, he's always kind of on, but that sounds like you got it in overdrive.
I mean, absolutely. And that was one of the things why when I'm doing all the, I mean, and at one point, man, I never thought I would write about anything other than music and movies, even in the early like I was living my childhood dream had come true, cause now I'm making a living doing this stuff, I'm finding myself in Cincinnati to interview Maroon 5, but they're not Maroon 5 like they are now. Like, so Adam Levine is becoming famous. He's not famous, And so when I interview him and I go to like a Howard Johnson's, in Cincinnati, and he said, "Hey, this is my only afternoon on." He goes, "I got a bunch of dirty clothes. Would you mind if we do this interview down the street? I need to go to a laundromat." And so, like, I walked to a laundromat with him.
Yeah.
And interviewed him at a laundromat on like a Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah.
But
that's cool.
You couldn't do that. You wouldn't do that now. I mean, he wouldn't have to go to the laundromat either, but
right.
That's just how that interview took place. Like, that stuff was happening. That was what I had dreamed, but there was something more, right? And I ended up, because I wanted to do something a little different, I went to do a Tracy Byrd story, a country singer, and I'm one of the big Tracy Byrd fan. I mean, nothing against him, but that music or what have you, but I needed to do an article on Tracy Byrd, and so I did it from the point of view of a music video director filming a Tracy Byrd video. And what was very instrumental about this particular video was Tracy was sort of in his own transition of what he had been, and now country music was becoming, he was kind of a 90s guy, thought of as a 90s guy, and now country music is at that point in the 2002-ish, 2003 area. It's becoming Kenny Chesney, Keith Urban, Tim McGraw. Tracy Byrd kind of a dork, kind of looked at as 10 years too late. And this music video director, Tom Oliphant, is hired to direct this Tracy Byrd video and make him cool. Like, help reimagine Tracy Byrd. And Tom had he had just won the CMA Video Director of the Year. He did Wide Open Spaces for the Dixie Chicks, and like all kinds of really cool videos he had done. His production company was responsible for image, the image of what Shania Twain was. And so they hire him for that. Like, okay, you're going to make Tracy Byrd. Well, he made Tracy Byrd so cool when CMT ended up seeing the video, they wouldn't play it because they said no one will believe Tracy Bird's that cool. I kid you not. And this is the article. This is me. Like, I'm in a couple of, I got to sit in on a couple of production meetings before they filmed, and then I'm there the night that they're filming all the footage. I go to the post house when they're editing it all together, and I'm watching this whole process, right? And talking to Tom, and we're basically the same age. He's like a year older than I am, and kind of like you and I. There's a lot of common things.
Yeah.
We have a lot of differences. Tom didn't live in a house in L.A. with 14 guys. He had a quieter life and went to film school and blah blah blah. But we were really getting along, and then I wrote this story, and he said, "Wow, this was great." He really liked the story that I put together, and then I said, "Hey, you got this company, you produce all these videos that you don't always direct." I said, "Man, I really want to direct a music video." He's telling me, no, keep being a writer. You're making a better living to the music video deal. It's a racket. And he would always say no. And I would always ask. And then all of a sudden one day he called me up and he said, "Hey, I'm done being a hypocrite." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "Well, you've always been asking to direct a video, and I keep telling you what a horrible existence it is to be a video director. And that's what I do." And I said, "Awesome." I said, "I don't even know what video it is. I'll do it. I can't believe you're calling me up to direct a video." And he goes, "I'm not calling you up to direct a video." He said, "I'm not going to direct videos anymore. I'm going to direct television, cable television, and I want to offer you a job as a writer producer with me, and let's make some TV shows." And so for 5 years, I made television shows with him.
Like, was this what kind of networks were you working on?
We did everything you can count down, anything you can count down on CMT. We counted it down.
Okay.
20 sexy videos,
All right.
20 sexy Southern women, 20 sexy Southern men, 20 greatest cowboy songs, 20 greatest bands, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
The 20 greatest moments of Shania Twain's career, the 20 greatest moments of Hank Williams Jr. career. We did it all.
Okay.
And there's some crazy stories that, like one time we were doing the 20 greatest moments of Hank Williams Jr. career. So number one naturally is going to be, are you ready for some football? His Monday night theme, And at the network, they said, so when you're doing those countdowns and you have all those talking heads, right? You have the people who talk. I would be the guy off camera talking to them, getting them to, throwing out things for them to talk about. And then we would have all those interviews transcribed, and then I would basically, from the transcription, paper cut the 90-minute show. And then an assistant editor would come along and string the whole thing together, and then you start to see where it works and doesn't, and then little by little it becomes more about the visual part, and so the editor starts to play a bigger and bigger and bigger role in the post-production. So it's a real natural, easy transition for someone who's a storyteller.
Yeah.
And so, but when we were doing this one, so that number one moment, and the network, CMT said, "Man, you've gotta, John Madden." They said, "We really want John Madden talking about how big that Monday night song is." Well, John is kind of, to say that he's a Wilford Brimley cantankerous guy would actually not do him justice. He's pretty prickly, and so he wouldn't do it. Guy would not, for no reason. There was no way he was going to do it. So instead, I was going to interview Brett Favre and Terry Bradshaw, and I reached out to Terry Bradshaw, and his manager was over to me, said, "Terry's over the moon. He wants to do it. Da 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 da. There's just one problem. you're going to have to go to him. He can't come to Nashville to do the interview. And I said, no, I'll go wherever. And they said, well, he's not at home. He's in Halifax, Nova Scotia, filming a movie of the week for Lifetime. And so I fly to Halifax, Nova Scotia to interview Terry Bradshaw on a Saturday morning because he's there filming a movie of the week. Now,
I didn't know he did any acting.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. He was in the Matthew McConaughey movie Failure to Launch. He plays Matthew's dad, and Kathy Bates plays his mom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. Terry's done some acting, and is quick to let you know he's recorded an album too.
Was it a country album?
Oh yeah. Well, it's that's what he called it.
Yeah. Well, he's from Louisiana or something, isn't he?
Yeah. And he lives in Texas, Oklahoma, right on the border between Texas and Oklahoma. And anyway, he's there filming, and he's like, "Yeah, absolutely, you got to come here." And so it's all set up for a Saturday. Now, after all the tickets are bought and I'm getting ready to go, I talked to him on the phone. He's all excited. He said, "Yep, we'll do it. We'll do the interview at 10. It's going to be at 10 in the morning." And he said, "And I got to be to the set at 1:00. It's my last day of filming." And we're having the wrap party that night. And he goes, "So I'd love for you to come to the wrap party." And meanwhile, I'm like thinking, why in the world am I flying to Halifax if Saturday is the last day? We could have done this Monday or Tuesday in the continental United States.
Right.
Right? So
yeah.
I'm already realizing there's a reason why they said that Terry Bradshaw can't spell cat if you give him the C and the T. And so I show up, and it's like 9:45 a.m. and I haven't heard from him, and I had sent him a text just saying, "Hey, we're all set up in the conference room. Whenever you're ready, come down. We'll get you ready, and we'll start shooting at 10 o'clock." Nothing. 10 o'clock, haven't heard from him. 10:05, haven't heard from him. 10:15, 10:20. It's getting close to 10:30. I had texted, no text back. I called his cell phone and went right to voicemail, so his phone's not even on. And I'm like, oh, man. So, like I say, it's like 10:30, and he said, he's got to be done by noon, and that by 1:00 he's got to be on the set. So I'm like realizing my time is running out. I've got to do the call of shame. I got to do the room to room call. I got to call his room, like the big, loud, heavy phone on the nightstand. I got to call that phone.
Yeah.
And so I call, and he answers, and he's like clearing his throat and whatever else. And I said, "Terry, Keith." "What?" I said, it's KRC, the interview, Hank Jr. And he's like, "Oh shit, I totally forgot." And I said, "Did I wake you up?" And he goes, No. He goes, "I may sound like I just woke up, but I haven't even gone to bed." And I said,
"Oh,
really?" And he goes, Where are you? I'll be right down. And he literally came to the interview like in the clothes that I think he went at the bar the night before.
Oh yeah. Oh man.
Go to do he comes in, and his eyes are all bloodshot, and he asked if we had any Visine. I'm like, "No, I don't have any Visine. I'm not a drinker." Like, what do you mean? His shirt's kind of wrinkly, and he's trying to pull it tight. And he's like, "Oh, let's just do it." And he sits down in front of the camera, and he starts sharing different Hank Jr. stories. Only the details are wrong. So,
okay.
So like, that Hank Jr. has a beard because he fell down a mountain and busted his face up.
Right. Yeah.
And so, but there's some very specific things to that accident, and Terry doesn't quite have them right, And
Yeah.
few other things about the story that he doesn't quite have down. And I said, hey, you know what? Let's talk about more of the personal stuff. Can you share? Like, do you remember? Like, when's the first time you met Hank Jr.? And he goes, dude, I've never met him. I'm just a fan like you. Wait, what? We were on the phone. We were all excited. You had all these personal stories. He goes, yeah, they're my personal stories. He goes, now I don't know the man. I never met him. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? And so I thought there's no way I can fly to Halifax and then not put Terry Bradshaw in the show. Like, it's not going to work. So I fed him a half a dozen lines that I knew as the writer for a fact we could use. And we were able to cut him in the show, and no one would have known that I flew to Halifax, and he was hungover and had to be told what to say.
All right, that was my talk with Keith Ryan Cartwright. Hope you enjoyed that. Again, his book that will be coming out in the fall, you can pre-order it now on Amazon. It is called Black Cowboys of Rodeo, Unsung Heroes from Harlem to Hollywood in the American West. And you'll have to wait until the book comes out to hear the other part of our conversation, in which he talks about the book and some of the highlights and stories from that. And it has a foreword by Danny Glover, the actor, so that's pretty cool. So congratulations to Keith on his book coming out, and the best of luck with him with his future writing. You can support this podcast in a number of ways. You can go to my Patreon page. The link is patreon.com/American Rambler. But you can buy my book if you want to support me that way. I know the fall semester is coming up, and you professors have probably put your book orders in already. But if you have not, and you want to assign something on the Civil War that is well written and also well researched, that I think your students would enjoy reading, or at least talking about, or maybe enjoy not liking it, because I know how undergraduates can be. They don't always like what they're reading, but if they have a strong reaction, all the better. But I certainly think grad students would enjoy it, because it is pretty short, and there's some military history. There's some good battle stuff in there, but also a lot of discussion of social history and the Confederate Army and slavery. So if you want a good Civil War book, academics, you can assign Marching Masters, Slavery, Race, and the Confederate Army during the Civil War. Or if you're just interested in the Civil War, you can read it. I sold a couple books in the last week or two, so that's always nice. But trying to get my work done on the Johnny Cash book, seems like that's never going to end. And trying to enjoy the summer while it lasts, spending a lot of time in the pool, and also going to the movies. Saw the new Anthony Bourdain movie, the documentary, that was quite good. And also saw Dial M for Murder at the Bird, the classic Hitchcock movie. Not one of the better ones, but it was good. It was interesting. Good crowd. Never seen it before. Didn't really know anything about it. So that was fun to take in a classic at a spectacular movie theater in Richmond. A true movie palace that is going on 100 years old at this point, the Bird Theater. So that was fun. All right, well, I got to get back to my Red Sox game. I hope you're doing okay. I will talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.